Okay, well, live, Chair.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. This is the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Board on the 14th of December, Wednesday the 14th. Welcome, everybody, to the meeting, to those who are formally here and anybody who chooses to listen in. Do we have any substitutes nominated for this evening's meetings or any apologies being sent?
None received today, Chair.
Good. Well, I'm assuming that means we've got a full house, which is great. Item 2, members' interests. I need to remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests that might have any relation to the items on the agenda. I think there are 1 or 2 to do now. If you think of one later, please shout out and we'll pick that up later. But there are a couple more at the moment to start with. Joe, I think you were indicating you needed to.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm the one of Calderdale's representative as a director on C&K Careers Board.
Thank you. And I think there's somebody else.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, so even though I'm not a member of the board of this Children and Young People's Scrutiny Board, I am a member of the board of C&K Careers along with Joe. So I'm one of the directors, of C&K Careers. So although so I just thought I'd mention that because I might end up wanting to to join in that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Anybody else at this minute? Nope.
Yeah, I've just raised my hand. I've been asked to come along by Rachel Smith, Health Improvement. I'm Alison Walklate. I'm the infant feeding lead for the 0 to 5 health visiting service.
Right, excellent. Yes, thank you very much for that. And I will endeavour to keep a better eye open for yellow hands raised. So thank you for that. Anybody else wish to?
Can I add one as well, actually? Just it's a personal one, probably personal stroke professional as a former employee of Calderdale College and also as a parent of a post-16 child.
Excellent, yes. Yes, I've got 1 or 2 post-16s, but they're very post-16 now, I'm afraid. But as you can tell by the colour of my hair, but there we go. Fine, so that's members' interests. And as I say, if there's anything else crops up.
Can I come in, Ashley, if that's okay?
Yeah. Yes.
I'll just share what Diana said. I've got 2 post-16 young people, but I am on the committee for the Calderdale National Autistic Society. So it's not pecuniary interest, but I thought I'd mention it here and not later.
Certainly doesn't do any harm, does it? Anybody else? I need to scroll the screen. Can't see any more hands. Shout or hold your peace until you get an opportunity. Okay, admission of the public. It's not recommended that the public be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of the items on this agenda. We're live anyway, so anybody who chooses to tune in can listen into what we've got to say. So that's just a reminder for that. Moving on to the first substantive item, post-16 provision in Calderdale. This is something we've talked about in the past, obviously a critical area for young people within Calderdale. I have a number of names down here. We also generally recognise in Scrutiny that we expect the members of Scrutiny Board to have read through the reports, and therefore we don't need to go through the whole thing. But does somebody want to kick the thing off in terms of bullet points or any additional items you'd like to put in at this stage?
Yes, I will do. Thank you, Chair. It's Martin Green. I'm the Chief Executive at C&K Careers. So I'll just do a very kind of brief introduction.
Please do.
I think, as Julie mentioned earlier, Paul Tinsley, the Assistant Director for Education and Inclusion, I think he's trying to get into the meeting. Hopefully he's in.
Indeed.
And myself, Louise Nellis, also from C&K Careers, and Julia Gray from Calderdale College, are here to kind of answer any questions, provide additional sort of material to the information that's already provided. So there were 3 papers sent to members of the Scrutiny Board. There's the covering report and an appended draft post-16 learning, employment and skills strategy, and then Appendix 2, which provides a detailed sort of in-depth breakdown of the journey of the 2022 Year 11 cohort as they transition into post-16 arrangements. And there's a lot of information and graphs within that Appendix 2.
Yeah.
So just very briefly, C&K Careers for colleagues who don't know us that well, is a company that operates at arm's length from the local authority, but is wholly owned by the local authorities of Calderdale and Kirklees. And whilst we trade kind of independently with schools and colleges, both inside and outside of Calderdale and Kirklees, our primary purpose is to fulfil the statutory responsibilities of the local authority in relation to careers education, information, advice and guidance, and most importantly, to ensure that the destinations and activity status of all young people in Calderdale is known and is reported to the Department for Education in line with the council's statutory responsibilities. So in order to do that, we work with partners in Calderdale to ensure that kind of relationship between schools, post-16 providers, between our careers advisors, and between other provision within the area and support services operates as effectively as it can do, and is directed towards preventing young people from becoming what's called NEET, not in education, employment and training in the first place, for ensuring that tracking of young people's destinations and participation takes place, for ensuring that we re-engage young people when they do become NEET, and for also ensuring that all young people apply for and have a suitable place in a post-16 provision. So generally, the kind of report outlines that arrangements in Calderdale work well. However, there are some there have been some trends that a number of partners, ourselves and particularly the authority, have become concerned about. And that has led to the drafting of a post-16 strategy, which members of the Scrutiny Board have, which seeks to address both those challenges, but also to improve on what is generally a very good set of arrangements within Calderdale and things that already work well. The concerns are summarised as being around the complexity of young people and the challenges that they face in terms of their social, emotional and kind of mental health. There are challenges around the capacity to engage with those young people, and there is a specific set of emerging concerns about post-16 provision, particularly when young people have dropped out of perhaps their first destination, find themselves NEET, and both the nature of their personal circumstances and the lack of provision within Calderdale available to them means that it becomes difficult to re-engage them. So the strategy was developed with significant input from young people and by a steering group of partners across the district. Some of those partners are with us this evening and can talk in more detail about the work. It's intended that the draft strategy will be considered by portfolio holders at the leaders briefing in January, and we hope that tonight provides the opportunity to provide any further input, amendments, additions, deletions to the draft document ahead of that leaders briefing. And as I've said, we've also provided that in-depth analysis of the journey of the 2022 Year 11 leavers to demonstrate how the kind of system works within Calderdale and the demography of the young people themselves. So again, happy to take any questions on that may arise.
Thank you, Martin. That's a good introduction for us. I don't know whether there's anybody who's particularly quick out of the blocks on this one. I've got questions to ask. I'm just having a quick scan. One of the things that strikes me is the significant increase in the NEET, not in education, employment and training aspect of it. I guess you regard this as a challenge, shall we say. Any thoughts on why that's happened? Is it a COVID output? Martin, what do you think, or your colleagues, in terms of the increasing NEET numbers?
I'll certainly kick off. I think there is an element of COVID still playing out here. I would say that there has been a rise. So we use something called the risk of NEET indicators. We use Ronnie for shorthand, but risk of NEET indicators, and they tend to be where young people have significant absence within pre-16. Where they may have had fixed term or permanent exclusions, where they may have other known risk factors, i.e., they're a young person in the care of the local authority and other things. And then we've certainly seen an increase in the number of young people who, whether it's kind of legacy of sort of COVID, whose education has been disrupted significantly, and they have below 70% attendance, and that is starting to feed through into a rise in NEET numbers. So I will caveat that and say that the performance of Calderdale in terms of the national rankings that take place on NEET numbers is still within the kind of top 40%, and is better than your statistical neighbours. So, authorities that are comparable to Calderdale, but it was one of the things that started to flash red to us on the kind of dashboard of things that we look at, and certainly instigated the strategy document that's been put in place. But you're right, it's doubled since 2019, and that's not good enough.
And I wonder, I've got a few hands up now, but just to finish off that thought, is there a link here to the exclusions, the increasing number of exclusions in schools? I guess they're pretty much related in the same way.
Yes, they are. And I think the worry is not only has there been this kind of immediate increase, but you would, if you look back into the kind of pre-16 world now, you would anticipate that in the years ahead, so in the 2023, 2024, 2025, we will get potentially a bigger increase in the NEET numbers. There's also something that is about the nature of provision as well, and is there appropriate provision within Calderdale for these young people? And the local authority has plans for and partners and schools has plans for increased kind of capacity within both its provision for young people with special educational needs and young people able to access alternative provision. So there's more capacity coming into the system in the future, which should help ensure that young people have a destination, a place in post-16. But there are some concerning sort of flashing indicators that we need to address.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll stop hogging the limelight here. I've got a number. I've got Councillor Rivron, I've got Councillor Tremaine, Councillor Durrans, and I've also got Julie Jenkins. Julie, did you want to come in on that particular question, or do you want to pick up later?
I'll come in later. Thanks very much, Councillor Evans.
Okay, so my first note is Councillor Rivron, Helen, and I'll come on to the others.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of sort of very specific questions, and then I want to say a little bit more about the NEET and related issues, which I think will probably be maybe the main theme of what we're to talk about. One was in relation to the percentage educated outside the authority. It seemed to me that on the covering report, page 3, it was 42%. And then on the Appendix 1, it was 30%. I might have misread it. There might be a reason why these are different figures, but if I've misread it, somebody else might as well. So we perhaps could have an explanation for that. Second point was around the issue around cooperation, which I know is hugely important, but as somebody who's worked for more years than I care to remember in post-16, competition is often the reality that we live with, and not always because of the pressure to retain and get people through qualifications, because those are funding driven, perhaps not always driven by the interests of the students or the learners. The other point I wish is these perhaps intractable related things, which seem to be the exclusion rate, the low number of people achieving a level 2 qualification up to 19, and the number of neat young people, and how we seem to perhaps be piling up a lot of difficult, intractable problems. And also, it seems to me, in the action planning, the recommendations seem to be addressing the issues rather than presenting us getting into this position in the first place. So perhaps we could also address this issue: how can we prevent this accumulation of intractable problems?
That sounds like a comprehensive question. Would somebody like to pick that one up?
Certainly, on the figures, the 42% outside of the authority is the right figure. That's the totality of the cohort. I'd have to either kind of rely upon Louise or go into the information in the appendix to explain whether there's an error, or we're looking at kind of apples and pears there. Perhaps Louise can have a look at that whilst we're on. The second point, Councillor Riddle, was that about competition between providers for? I mean, because. But the way funding is pupil and qualification driven, often there is competition both to attract providers and to retain providers. And well, I would say, I think there's certainly anecdotal, I think there's more hard evidence that it doesn't always work in the interests of the learners. So something we welcome, cooperate something welcome, but competition is often the reality. Yeah, I think I would describe how I see the kind of the post-16 arrangements in Calderdale. Is that there's a really good breadth, whether that's within Calderdale or kind of outside, and we have to accept that the boundaries of the area are very kind of porous, and often the choices that young people may reflect more ease of transport and ease of getting to place rather than necessarily the kind of quality or the offer of learning that's there. But generally, young people in Calderdale have a good choice of high quality provision. I think what has happened is that the market, particularly for independent training providers, doesn't work particularly well in Calderdale, partly due to its size. And it is about the market, but the ability to have to attract learners in sufficient numbers to make provision financially viable for small scale private independent providers has gone. So there's a figure within the report that says some years ago there were 10 such providers. It's now down to kind of 2 really, and so our ability to re-engage provision re-engage young people when they've dropped out of provision is hindered by the market. But it's not so much that it's competitive, it's that it's not viable in some instances. Now the college, the college does some brilliant work in subcontracting provision and developing alternative pathways for young people that aren't within the mainstream kind of college environment, but they also face limitations in their funding, to necessarily kind of meet that need that we have. It's a really challenging kind of set of circumstances over which there's not a great deal of sort of statutory control, unfortunately. The final point, tackling rather than preventing. I would hope that within the full strategy document, you'll see that there is a lot of effort that is pre-16 based. So that we are conscious that if you wait for the problem to occur and for young people to come into post-16, then you're only ever kind of tackling the symptoms. You're not addressing the root cause of the issues. And there is work identified that it requires cooperation across the virtual school, within kind of children's and adults' mental health services, in addressing those risk of NEET indicators at an earlier age. But if that's something that we feel needs strengthening, we'll absolutely address that.
That's a very interesting point on the latter one there. I don't really want to come back in a second, Helen, on that. But certainly as a chair of primary school, some years ago now, we did some work in relation to talking to primary school children about long-term career and thinking about things which feeds into the secondary school education and eventually taking subjects, deciding on subjects rather than suddenly being presented with them. And I think that's an area which I've not seen much happen on for recent times. Is that something which you or colleagues are looking at? Or
absolutely, Councillor Evans, and there's a specific kind of action within the full strategy document that is aimed. In fact, there's two that are aimed at addressing that at the primary phase. So whilst it's a post-16 strategy, it recognises that you need to start on that stuff and on that journey from the age of as early as you can do, from seven upwards.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Martin. Councillor Tremaine, Diana. You've got your hand up, and then I've got Danielle, and I've got Julie Gray as well. I've picked up as well.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a list of questions, but I promise I won't ask them all in one go. I'll let other people have a go. I think this links in with the sort of NEET and the suitability of provision as well, and it's pulled out quite a lot in the strategy document. This concern about the range of provision, which is below level 2, and how that has really decreased since the pandemic in particular. And just that, as someone who previously taught ESOL on 16 to 18 study programs, where pretty much everything I taught was below level 2, I know absolutely how crucial that provision is, and if people aren't engaged and if that isn't available, then it's really, really hard to re-engage people especially if there isn't enough range of provision there. So I kind of wondered where we're at in terms of looking at addressing that, because the strategy is quite, it's very interesting the way it highlights the success in Kirklees compared to Calderdale in that area. So I wonder if anyone could feed into that a little bit.
So I think Julie is probably best to come in on this.
Yes, thanks, Martin. Thanks, Councillor Tremaine. A couple of points on that. So it's not necessarily that the amount of level 2 and below provision has shrunk, and I can speak, but particularly from a college perspective, it's that the demand for it has changed. So the type of provision that's required for pre-level 2 provision is more specifically around the lines of what Martin referred to earlier as our subcontracted provision. So part of the subcontracted provision that we have at the college is with Project Challenge, and it's very specific, designed around a youth worker and entry-level provision that's designed for young people who are not in education, employment and training. It's not delivered at college, it's actually delivered at the Orange Box, and that's a really key part of the delivery, in that it's for young people who are not yet ready to be in a busy college environment. And that's the element of provision that needs to grow. And as an organisation, what we've done this year is increase the numbers at Project Challenge. So we've increased the places that are available to young people to be able to access that provision at Project Challenge, and also increased the numbers of high needs students with education, health and care plans who are able to access that provision, which is a really important part of the work that's done down at Project Challenge. The other thing that's taking place at the college is a strategic review this year. It started last year and is continuing into this year, is a full review of the foundation provision, taking in absolutely everything that's delivered from a foundation learning perspective at the organisation. So one piece of work which I've set off in train already is a greater joined up partnership with Ravenscliffe around the post-16 provision to map that SEND provision across the borough. So that goes back to Councillor Riveron's question around competition and around competition for numbers. So it's more important that the provision is mapped for the students. So I'm going to use the word students rather than young people, because obviously we're moving into adults as well. So it's more important that the provision is mapped for the students of Calderdale rather than it being a competitive environment. That's really important that we do that work, because what we shouldn't be doing is repeating the post-16 offer for high needs students, moving from Ravenscliffe into the college and it just being a similar thing but in a different setting. So that's a really important piece of work that's been doing, that's ongoing and will continue into the next year. The other thing that's taking place is at the college, one of the things that we've introduced is restart courses. So they take place throughout the year, and they are for 16 to 18-year-old students who have dropped out of programmes for generally because of social, emotional, mental health reasons, meaning that they've been unable to continue on their programmes, sometimes behavioural programmes as well. And that complements our Prince's Trust provision, which takes place off-site, which again has a similar aim. And all of that is to be strengthened as part of the review of foundation learning at the college, because we absolutely recognise that there is this increased need for it. But it isn't just as straightforward as can you put on another programme at the college, because the college isn't necessarily the right setting for the people who are falling into this category that we've identified within the strategy, and that are falling out of education at the moment. So it's got to be planned very, very carefully, and it's got to be planned with the needs of those students in mind, to make sure that it is a successful journey for them, and it's the start of a successful journey, because the disrupted education of the previous 2 years cannot be underestimated. And this is it isn't a Calderdale issue, it's a national issue, it's a nationwide issue, and it's something that we absolutely recognise at the college, and we recognise how that is impacting on the students of Calderdale College, and are putting very stringent measures in place to ensure that we are meeting the needs of the students, of not just now but of the future as well, who've had their education disrupted.
Yeah, thank you.
If I could just add on the point about the Kirklees kind of comparison, what Kirklees chose to do with their employment hub funding, which was European monies via the combined authority, was to design a kind of bespoke provision for that, that particularly challenging cohort of young people, that meets the personal circumstances, that isn't, provision that, as Julia says, that the college can just put on and, kind of build it and they will come. This is deeply kind of personalised provision for some really challenging young people. I think Kirklees probably, were experiencing some of these issues within the cohort earlier than perhaps within Calderdale, but that rising numbers of young people who were NEET that Councillor Evans rightly identified at the beginning means that we've been working with Kate McNicholas, the Assistant Director in the economy side of the local authority, to ensure that the next version of the employment hub within Calderdale specifically picks that issue up, and there is a pot within the new programme that will be live from 1st of April that allows the authority to commission that sort of activity, and that will make a massive difference. It's small numbers of young people, but it's those young people who are NEET and are persistently NEET, and for whom the college and others struggle to make an offer of kind of suitable provision. So there are good things happening to respond to it.
I mean, that's good to hear, Martin. I mean, what you're saying there, I think, is that the Kirkleys have sort of stolen a march on us in terms of employment hub funding and making use of that. But we're moving in that direction now from April. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. Absolutely. And alongside the things that Calderdale College are doing that Julie has just outlined means we'll be in a much stronger kind of place in terms of the provision that is available and that ability to meet what are some very complex needs. I think Kirklees didn't steal the needs were just presented to them. I think it's the nature of the place, the size of the place, and some of the challenges particularly around kind of exclusions, etc., that they've perhaps experienced before Calderdale.
Interesting, and good that we're picking up on that. One of the benefits of having an organisation like yourself being across the two areas. Sorry, who's coming in there?
So I was just going to ask if I could add one more thing, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and Julia, that was a really comprehensive answer. And I think what was really pleasing in the strategy was the focus on trying to work across partnerships better. Not just pre-16, but across the different providers, and I think that's crucial. And I think hopefully that might address some of the concerns that Councillor Rubin had as well. I was just thinking, and this may be something more for Julie, I don't know. The virtual school was mentioned, and the role of the virtual school here, and just how key that is, certainly for some of the young people in particular. I was just looking the other day at the fact that there are some pupil premium plus post-16 trials taking place, and I don't think Calderdale is part of that, but I'm guessing that in terms of capacity and funding, that's a concern, because that isn't available post-16 to the same degree as it is earlier. How can that be addressed? Or is that something that we're hoping that we might be able to kind of address, because it could make quite a big difference for some of the people that really are at risk of not engaging or not having the right kind of provision.
Interesting.
Shall I come in there, Councillor Evans? Thanks very much, Councillor Tremaine, for letting us know about that. I wasn't aware that those pilots were happening. So we'll have a conversation with Parveen Akhtar, who has been to Scrutiny before, who's the virtual school head, about linking in with some of the areas that are piloting that work. She's in a regional network. I'm not sure if any of them are going on in the Yorkshire and Humber. Councillor Tremaine, or are they further afield?
Kirklees is a pilot area.
Okay,
yeah,
that's great. We can link up with Kirklees then and see what they're doing, if there's any learning from that. But thanks for letting us know about that. We will follow it up.
Good, thank you. Julia, did you had your hand up anyway? Do you want to come in with anything else at this stage?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. It was just in response to Councillor Rivron's comments earlier. I just wanted to highlight two pieces of policy. Specifically, two pieces of national policy which will support the further developments of the points that you raised in your second question. The first one is around the post-16 skills bill, which came from the FE white paper, and that has delivered as a part of that accountability around skills and meeting the skills agenda for all post-16 providers. So all colleges are required to meet the skills agenda within the areas that they serve, but also as a consequence of that, they are expected to act in an anti-competitive way, in a way that is best suited to meet the needs of the students that they are serving. So the accountability of that lies with Ofsted, and it's very clear within that within the Ofsted framework, the Education Inspection framework, how that works and what the expectations are around that, and that's where the accountability for that element of the post-16 skills bill comes in. The other element of policy I just wanted to highlight, which will further enhance ability for the tracking through of careers guidance that we talked about previously, and Councillor Evans, it goes back to what you talked about from a primary school perspective and about planning those skills right the way through, which is absolutely vital, is the legislative requirement, which has been in place, but it has been further strengthened with very, very specific requirements around schools that are now mandated to allow employers and post-16 providers, so not just from not just from like a C&K careers point of view, who deliver excellent careers advice and guidance, but also specific post-16 providers delivering apprenticeships and education programs for young people, and the various different opportunities that are available. Schools are now mandated to allow them into their to meet their students for meaningful interactions, as it's described in the bill, and the meaningful interactions must take place in a specified number of times per year. So that strengthens the ability to track those career aspirations through for the young people as they're working their way through school. So I just wanted to highlight those two bits of policy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Danielle, Councillor Durrance, you've been very patient. What's your question, please?
No, it's been fine, thanks, Chair, because a lot of what I was going to ask has been asked, but I just wondered if I could expand on a little bit, just to have a bit of a clearer understanding. We've referenced lots about need and how you're addressing that, particularly in the project work, and I know Project Church and Project Challenge are really good offers. I think one of my questions is particularly around the students that are struggling or have struggled previously to engage, and then that's been addressed. How much work has been looked at on their aspirations when you're redeveloping what the offer is, compared to just capacity building? Because considering the compounded needs of some of them students, just building on capacity and spaces, I would think would have an impact. And I know there are other neighbouring boroughs, particularly with the offer of a similar scheme to Project Search, who have been able to engage with a wider offer than what we have in Calderdale, because I know we have a very, very limited offer in Calderdale, not just within spaces, but in actual what the experience and placement offers. And I just wondered if there's been any work to do with that, so that within the inclusion part of the strategy, that particularly around SEND, and I would say even the challenging behaviours should come under that category, whether they've got an EHC or not, because behaviour is a need. But how much are we considering parking the need and remembering the aspiration offer for those students as well?
Interesting. Who would like to come back on that?
I'm happy to come back on that if that's okay. So yes, you're right. It isn't about capacity building. It's not about capacity building. It is about addressing aspirations and meeting the needs of those aspirations for the people that the education is serving. Just in relation to the comment around Project Search, so for those who don't know, Project Search is the supported internship that's run at the college, and the supported internship a brilliant model. But Councillor Jones is right, it is restricted at the moment because the supported internship model that we run at the college is the offer is available, and it's based at the hospital. So it's based at the hospital in Calderdale, and it is restricted only for high needs students. So that's for students between 16 and 25 who have an education, health and care plan, who are entitled to continue on to the supported internship, and they get the support for that. The supported internship will only ever be available for those with an educational health and care plan, because that's the legal framework around that. So we are quite restricted with that. And unfortunately, traineeships, which is the equivalent pathway of that, that's not within a supported internship model, have just been withdrawn. So that's news in this week, that they have been withdrawn from the funding model. So they will no longer be available to young people because they've just not been widely used by the sector at all, which is somewhat of a shame. In terms of how that develops moving forward, the supported internship is really important, but we understand that it being based at a hospital is quite off-putting to some of our young people with SEND. So it does need developing further, and again, that's part of the review of foundation learning within the college, that does need broadening. There have been attempts to broaden that. We do offer internships within the college at the moment, but we have attempted to broaden it. We need big employers to broaden it, and that's obviously one of the challenges that we have in Calderdale, is that we are limited on the number of very large employers that we can have as sponsors of the supported internship. We do need big employers in order to be able to broaden it. We have attempted to do it, but we've been somewhat hampered by COVID, unfortunately. However, that's needs to be developed, and it does have to be moved forward, and that will be moved forward in the next 12 months. I'm not sure I answered all the questions there. Martin's got his hand up as well.
Thank you for that, Julia. I know that, Diana, you've probably got other questions. I've got one here which I'd like to ask, perhaps as a bit of a general one in some ways. Martin, when you were doing your initial introduction, you were emphasising the fact that young people have been very much involved in developing this process, which is really good to hear, the children's voice and all that sort of thing. And therefore that has been built into where you're operating. But are they clear where to find the information? It's the signposting aspect of it which always concerns me about these sorts of things. It's great having a really good model. It's people accessing it and being able to access the information is very important. What's being done in terms of signposting young people to access this information and what's available to them?
Yeah, so I would say this because we kind of do it, but I would say that young people have access to, careers advisors and careers information in Calderdale in a way that young people in other local authority areas don't. So as well as the local authority, being a massive supporter and going above and beyond its kind of, the fulfilment of its statutory kind of duties in terms of careers education. We're very fortunate that every single secondary school in Calderdale also buys a service from C&K Careers, and there's a careers advisor embedded in every secondary school. I think we're also very fortunate as well that the arrangements for post-16 provision in Calderdale are quite compact, and there's a relatively small number of sizable kind of providers with the college and the new sixth form, taking the majority of kind of young people. The ability to not bombard young people with a huge array of kind of options is good, and there is good collaboration across the system to ensure that. Is that enough? my answer is no. There is always more that you can do to help young people make informed choices. And I think the biggest part of improving that is also working with the parents as well and carers, because the choices of young people are often hugely influenced by parents and carers, regardless of how much kind of information you put before them about alternative pathways. That parental kind of influence is quite rightly, massively sort of important, but sometimes does lead to young people making the wrong choice. And I'm glad you raised the issue about the young people's kind of input into the strategy in particular, because overwhelmingly they were generally positive about the work that we do, the work that colleges, the work that schools do to support them. However, there are a number of young people who were just not clear what they wanted to do, or had made
what I want to do.
Absolutely. I find myself at that stage of life where I still have no clue what I want to do.
Yeah.
And they felt as though they were having to make a choice without being able to really kind of, what I call taste it, smell it, touch it, feel it. They weren't sure whether they wanted to go into engineering or animal care or health and social care. They weren't sure whether they wanted to do A levels or a more vocational route or an apprenticeship. And I think they felt that whilst there was the opportunity to try things, if you don't succeed or you don't stick or you feel as though you've made the wrong choice, it's not impossible to change track, because it's not, but it becomes a little bit more difficult, and the system doesn't always facilitate a change of mind or that ability to try a whole range of things before deciding that that's what you want to do. Now, some of the stuff that Julia talked about in terms of the restart and project search is exactly applicable to that ability to respond to a request from young people for flexibility and for not information, but I think experiences at an earlier age that help them to make those decisions about, the sort of things that they want to pursue. And so the more that we can work with employers, the more that we can build in kind of work experience, the more that we can give taster days, the more that we can support parents to support their young people to make good choices and the right choices, is really important. And that's the stuff within the strategy that it is the kind of pre-16 stuff, I think.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Martin. I see that Will Solomon's got his hand up. Good to see Will. Question for us, please, or for anybody here?
Thank you, Councillor. I think firstly I should probably say C&K Careers do a really good job, especially personally I'm currently in that figuring out uni and stuff stage, and I think, and because C&K Careers, I was part of that sort of COVID years of missed exams in GCSE, but then didn't do any work experience or that kind of stuff leading up to A levels and GCSEs, and C&K Careers has done a pretty good job in sort of managing us sort of through that and guiding us along with sort of working with teachers a lot as well. I think I had one sort of quite specific question and then a slightly broader one. In the report, you talked about sort of pipeline skills. I think it was health, manufacturing, digital. Is social care included with health? Are we sort of putting that in there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then my sort of broader one was about sort of forward planning, and because obviously COVID has been a massive hit for post-16 and pre-16 education. The sort of ripples of COVID in years to come, I know sort of stuff about attention span has been sort of massively hit when it's either been online learning or especially younger kids moving up into secondary school. So when sort of they were doing home learning, and that was obviously very hard very hard for the kids, but then very hard for parents as well, especially if they didn't have any background in teaching. So attention spans, and then how might that affect stuff, and then sort of cost of living and all the sort of other issues that come along with that. How in the next sort of couple of years, do we have any idea of sort of how they're going to affect cohorts of students and sort of their outlooks, and what are the sort of steps we should be taking now, or at least the monitoring we should be doing now to sort of keep an eye out for that stuff?
Thank you for your feedback. That's hugely encouraging to hear. I'm very grateful for it. That's a really good set of kind of questions, and I'm going to have to call upon my colleagues for assistance in answering all of it. What I would say, particularly on the cost of living, we've seen some not strange, but some things happening in terms of the outcomes that we would want for young people that aren't necessarily helpful. So alongside the cost of living, we know we have, employers who are experiencing and continue to experience significant shortages of people willing and able to work for them. And what we've seen most recently is a number of young people who have been enticed into work, who have perhaps dropped out of their college provision and have been seduced by very good wages that employers are willing to offer to young people, but not necessarily for work. It's not for apprenticeships. And there have been young people who have left apprenticeships to earn 12, 13, 14, 15 pounds an hour. And whilst that might be hugely beneficial to those young people and to their families, struggling with increased costs and reduced money, in the long run, what we know happens is that when that demand for labour takes a downturn, it is always young people who suffer quickest, earliest and most. It will be those young people who are laid off, and those young people will find themselves almost in a worse situation than they were, because they won't have completed their study programme, they won't have the qualifications, and they're out of work, and their entitlement to public funds for learning may well have expired at that end. It may not have, but it's not ideal, but it's fully understandable. And this has happened to young people who I know. Friends of my daughter have been in exactly that kind of situation. It's a challenge. On the other kind of questions, colleagues, do you want to come in?
Julia, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Will. Thank you for your question around that. In terms of how we keep an eye on the young people coming forward and coming through the system, because we're so fortunate that all the secondary schools in Calderdale buy our service, we're able to work with year 8 upwards. So that means that what we're doing is we're sitting down with the schools and we're looking at, tell us how the year 8s are doing, tell us how the year 9s are doing, any ones we need to intervene with, watch out for, look out, any performance slipping, any attendance issues, things like that. So what the advisors are doing is, yes, providing a universal service to all, but then a targeted service to those that need it. And that's done in conjunction, in partnership with the school who flag up the young people to us. All that gets recorded on our CCIS system. So all that information in that infographic comes from our CCIS system on the year 11s. So what we're doing is building up a picture from year 8 onwards, due to the fact the schools buy us in, and intervening. So the NEETs that we talk about, there's so many young people who, for example, might have been NEET but aren't NEET because of the Ronnie work and the early intervention and support that's happened as well. It's just that they're sometimes harder to prove or justify, because obviously they haven't then slipped into NEET. They've actually, managed to sort of do transitions and support, but there could have been a lot of work that went on behind that as well in order to achieve that. we can actually report on it, to be fair, because we do flag up all the young people that the schools tell us are vulnerable, and we have all these risk of NEET indicators that Martin mentioned. So that helps us to build a picture and then really sort of hone in and support those young people that we feel need it from year 8 upwards. I hope that helps a bit.
Yes, thank you for that. Diana, you said you had a whole list of questions. Have we covered all of yours, or do you want to come back in?
Don't worry too much. I think quite a lot of them have been covered. I guess I'm just thinking about the strategy, and it's a starting point, isn't it? It's not the end point. It's very much the starting point, and I'm so pleased that we've kind of got this in place, because I think the kind of post-16 area has been. It has perhaps sometimes got a bit neglected, just for various reasons, and I won't go into that. That's a whole different conversation. So I'm looking at the actions and the table of actions, and what happens now. How do we kind of keep that focus so that this gets carried through and isn't just a strategy, a document that we kind of maybe look at once a year? How do we make sure it actually gets put into practice and makes a real difference? Because I think it has the ability to make a real difference to people.
Yeah, good point. Reaction to that? Are we happy with that statement? I certainly am.
I'm happy to answer that as best as I can. Paul might be helpful as well. So the intention when the draft strategy goes to the leaders briefing and portfolio holders consider that, is that there's also a report that says, and this is how we think it should best be implemented. Obviously it's a partnership document. It is predicated upon partners collaborating and doing that, and the people who were involved in the steering group need to continue being involved in its implementation. The actions will be turned into a proper action plan. There will be timescales put against them. There will be people or organisations assigned the responsibility for leading on them. And I think the right thing to do is probably to have somebody dedicated to coordinating that action plan and making sure that it's driven through, and making sure that the connections across the system need to happen, because this isn't, it's not about an individual institution. It's not just about the local authority. There's a whole range of partners who need to cooperate and collaborate to make this happen. But it won't happen unless somebody, I think, is given the accountability and the responsibility to drive it forward. So I hope, as a kind of key person involved in the strategy, that sort of implementation arrangement is recommended also, and that is supported.
Thank you for that. Yes. Is that an adequate response, Diana, for you? Good.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
I don't think I can see any other hands raised in relation to this item. I think it's important to say that I think we were all impressed with the depth and information, the quality of information which is provided in this report. I think it's an excellent report, and there's some very, very good stuff coming through there. Like with all things, as you yourselves have said, Martin and colleagues, there are areas for improvement, which is it's good to recognise that and move on one step further. And I think that's really good, and we look forward to it coming back to us. And I think it was Diana said that we like to see where it's going next time around, as it were, and some of these objectives are being achieved. But some good stuff. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Julia, I think that somebody has put on the chat that we ought to thank you. I'm going to try and make reference to that at this point, because my brain is a bit numb at the moment. I'm just recovered from COVID. That's my excuse anyway. And I tend to forget things. So, I think we need to thank you for all the work you've put in, and anybody else who wants to throw in some thoughts on that, I'm open for them to do so that we make sure that's included. Mike, you've got your hand up there.
I just wanted to say, Chair, before you finish, that when you and Councillor Tremaine discussed this item with me the other day, you were talking about it being an important strategy that you felt that Cabinet should formally.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the reminder, Mike. Yeah, I was going to go on to the under the main issues to scrutiny on page 14 of the document we've been referring to. It says the final strategy implementations with recommendations for children and young people scrutiny board will be discussed at leaders briefing. That's been mentioned in January, and that cabinet members will decide if they wish formal approval as cabinet. I think that we need to put together some of our views here and put them formally to cabinet. Mike, would you be willing to help put that together for us, please, based on what we've been saying this evening?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And our members of the scrutiny board happy that we should do that. I think this is an important issue. Having asked the question and now prejudging it, I think this is a really important area. There's lots of good stuff going on. There's other things happening. I really think we need to give some formal feedback to cabinet and seek their response to that as well. Are we happy with that? Please shout if you're not. Can't hear anything shouting. Okay, thank you. We will do that. And thanks for all those who've contributed to this item. Fascinating item. And
Chair, Julie Jenkins has her hand up.
All right, Julie, my apologies. Yes, did I not come back to you in the end?
You didn't. It's fine, Councillor Evans, don't worry. I just wanted to say a couple of things in relation to that last point.
Please
One,
do.
Councillor Wilkinson is on scrutiny tonight, so obviously you can hear your comments, and the discussion has been really helpful. We wanted to bring it here first in draft form, which is what you've seen this evening, and you've given us some really important feedback that I think we need to consider. One of them being particularly around project search and how we can expand that into big employers in the borough, and that is something that Cabinet have definitely got an interest in and are really ambitious for our young people. And of course the council is one of the biggest employers, as we know, within the borough, so I think it'd be really good to get that considered. I'm not sure whether Councillor Wilkinson wants to come in at all and add any comments this evening, but I'm sure would welcome it going from leaders brief and then for more formal consideration.
Adam, do you want to come in on it?
But only just to really echo what Julie said, yeah, really welcome any input, and I think it's been a good discussion tonight. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, and we'll be fascinated to hear what Cabinet's response is to all of this. So good, as we say, an important area. Thank you very much, one and all, on this one.
Sorry,
we move?
Chair. Martin Green still has a hand up.
My apologies, Martin. I've suddenly realised we've taken on this one, so I'm just
no, thank you, Chair. It's my final point. I didn't want to lose sight of Councillor Riveron's question about the data that we weren't able to answer. So if we can work through Mike or Sophie and just get a specific answer to the question about is there a discrepancy in the data, we will do that outside of the meeting.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for jumping in and stopping me on that one. Good. Okay. Let's move on to item 7.
Chair, sorry, if it's okay, can we just pop back to the minutes before we move on? I think they were skipped at the beginning of the meeting.
They were. I was so excited about these items on the agenda, and thank you for the reminder. So yes, formally, what I should have done was to ask if there were any questions. So if you can cast your mind back, any comments on accuracy of the minutes and whether we can accept them as a true representation of the last meeting on the 9th of November. Does anybody have any comments or queries to make on that? No. So can I say that we formally accept those minutes? Thank you very much. Good. And thank you for the reminder. As I say, I like to get onto the meat of it rather than things like that. Please may I go on to starting well, item 6. Opportunity for the board to consider the approach to starting well agenda in Calderdale and its strategy and the role of family hubs as a delivery model for that. And this area of family hubs is a very important one. And I think maybe that for some of us needs a little bit of explanation what it is, how it works. Is it a place, or is it people? Is it both of those things, and so on? Who is going to kick off on this one, please?
Chair, may I just say something at the beginning? which
Please.
is that Ben and Rachel gave us some background papers which are not for publication, but to inform the discussion. And I have to say, give my apologies to the board, because I've really not done very well with this. I managed to send them to the wrong scrutiny board, first of all. Councillor Tremaine spotted this, and I sent them out to the CYP circulation list I had, which only included the councillor members of the board. So I'm desperately been trying to get them out more widely this evening, but my apologies to members for that, and to Ben and to Rachel, because I've messed up a bit here. But I will make sure that I get out to everybody. I'll make sure everyone gets them as soon as I can.
Yeah, these things happen, Mike. And if you feel that we're missing something in there, please jump in as well. If it's not got to people in time for them to read, please jump in and highlight areas you feel which we may or may not be missing. So in terms of the main paper, who's going to introduce it, please? Is it Ben or one of your colleagues?
It'll be me, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah. There you go.
What I'd like to do first of all, just before I start, is introduce the guests that we've brought with. If I can ask Alison to introduce herself.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Alison Walklate. I'm the infant feeding lead for the Calderdale 0 to 5 health visiting service.
And we've got Bernadette.
Bernadette Johansson, Programme Manager for the Family Hub Start for Life programme.
Rachel Smith.
Evening, Rachel Smith, Senior Public Health Practitioner working in the Public Health team at Calderdale Council.
Karen Parkinson.
Evening, everybody. I'm Karen Parkinson. I'm the Children and Families Lead for Halifax Opportunities Trust, who run half the children's centres in Calderdale.
We've got Rona.
Hi everybody, Rona Radley, Deputy Director for Improvement at Calderdale Cares Partnership.
We've got Claire Lowe.
Hi, I'm Claire Lowe. I'm the Perinatal Service Manager for the Specialist Community Team with South West Yorkshire Mental Health Trust.
And I think that's everybody who we've got as a guest. If I've missed anyone now, shout now. Thank you. So what I wanted to do is give you a quick brief overview, if that's okay, Chair. A couple of minutes from Rachel on the strategy, and Bernadette, a couple of minutes from Bernadette on the Family Hubs bit. But really, we wanted to hear from you, take your questions, and any kind of support that you can give us to help shape our journey, if that's okay. So you've seen all of you have seen the overview paper that's submitted, and it gives a bit of an update on where we've come from in terms of our post inspections, in terms of peer review and the actions that we've been taking, and sets out our strategic vision and intent. So I think you all know about the Calderdale vision, and the vision that everybody's able to lead a larger life. I've spoken a few times here about the wellbeing strategy that sits underneath that, and the aspirations within that to ensure children of school age have hope and aspiration for the future, and children preschool are ready for school, and we narrow the gap between those who are eligible for free school meals and those who are not. And that kind of leads us on to really our strategic approach for starting well. We've developed, or in the process of developing, a starting well strategy. As I say, Rachel's going to talk about that in a bit. And our whole ethos of what we're trying to achieve in starting well is delivered by the Family Hubs programme, and Bernadette's going to talk about that. So I'll hand over to Rachel, if that's okay, for a couple of minutes about the starting well strategy, and then she'll hand on to Bernadette.
Thank you, Ben. Rachel.
Thank you. So the papers that we circulated ahead of the meeting were two things. So one was our draft starting well strategy. Now this has been developed with guidance from our starting well board, and also from the starting well strength and needs assessment that we did with our local communities. I think we had over 700 responses to our survey, and we did focus groups with key groups of families, including BAME communities, dads, underserved families, and professionals as well. So all that has been collated and brought together alongside, we've had some stakeholder workshops to really solidify down what we see as our 4 key objectives. So in the strategy, you'll find that we've got 4 key objectives. So one is all families have the support and information they need to enable them to support their child's development. The next one is families at high risk of poor outcomes get early support and are actively involved in the care and support they receive. And that new and expectant families have the support they need for healthy preconception, a healthy pregnancy, healthy families, and a healthy child for the first year. And finally, all families have safe, accessible play areas, activities, environments, and opportunities to meet and socialise with other families. So there are key objectives that we'll be using to frame all the work we do within early years. Alongside this document, we've also circulated 2 graphics. Now, these are what we would say are our plan on a page, really simplified versions of our strategy that really set out how it fits with the wellbeing strategy for Calderdale and the Starting Well approach. So it's both these are in draft format. We really welcome your sort of feedback and thoughts and advice, really, on taking that forward. I'll hand over to Bernadette.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The Family Hubs programme in Calderdale will be following the objectives of the Starting Well strategy. The programme itself, designed by the government, and where 75 authorities, including Calderdale, have been asked to sign up, is very much about that early start. It very much joins in with the strategy we already have about getting in there early, supporting families, reaching the families that we haven't previously managed to reach, and making sure that children get the best start so that they're school ready, and very much building on that some of the information we discussed earlier, really, about, you know, sorting some of this stuff out quite early so that people have a good start and can perform well in school and so on. There's lots of different strands to the programme, and over the last few months we've been involved in the sign up and making sure that we have things in place and have plans in place so that we can meet the demands of that programme. And that includes elements such as infant feeding, perinatal mental health support, parenting support, and so on. So we've been doing that over the last few months, and we've successfully signed up to the programme. We're now in the delivery plan phase, and we will be submitting the delivery plan to the Department of Health and Department for Education next week, and we'll hear confirmation in January about that. I think the key thing here has to be ambition, and it has to be the big picture transformation of early help, and using this grant that we will receive from the government to really have a unique opportunity to be able to focus on that transformation. It's not about necessarily adding services, it's about changing the way we do things, joining up services, integrating services, doing what we can with what we have at times, but in a much better way than we have done previously. And there's a real appetite across the multi-agency partnership for that. Our colleagues from health, in all the different departments of health involved with the early years, have been really helpful in making sure that we can pull this together so that we can develop really, really strong programmes to support families at this really important time in childhood. From that early antenatal phase, when we identify families through that early phase up to the age of 5. But we're also looking at what we can do for that 5 to 19-year-old group as well, and that is very much part of the programme. But I think the emphasis is on the Start for Life and that 0 to 5. But we are, as part of the Family Hubs programme, looking at the whole range of childhood. It's a big, ambitious project over 3 years, but it is a unique opportunity for us to be able to do that and build on the funding that we're receiving to really build strong networks that can support families. I'll leave it there for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette. You okay if I just wrap that bit up and then we move on to questions, Chair?
Please do. And yes.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that people always hear when they hear the word family hubs is they think buildings, and it's more than just buildings. It's about the virtual offer that we have, and it's about the outreach offer that we have, as well as what we provide through buildings. I think it's really important to emphasise that. And I think it's really important to emphasise it in the context of perhaps our virtual offer as it's being a bit disparate and spread out in different areas, and trying to bring that together as something that's cohesive and a single point for families, children and young people to access is really important in today's age, I think. I think the other thing I just wanted to highlight was coming back to the wellbeing strategy. We've got 4 key ways of working that we describe in there, and Bernadette's covered that really, but I just want to re-emphasize it. Joining things up is really important, and it's really important from the perspective of the people who we're serving, so that they only have to tell their story once, that they can be partners in their care, and understand that if they access the system, whatever point they access the system, they'll get the support they need rather than be bounced around. So that's really important. Embedding prevention in what we do, getting further upstream. Bernadette talked about this, trying to get to a point where we're getting on top of things much earlier, and that's early intervention, and that's prevention as well, stopping things happening in the first place. Ensuring that as best we can, we're doing everything we can to tackle inequalities, and there's lots of inequalities for us to go at in that respect, and it's one of those core themes that we'll be looking at through all of the delivery work streams, some of which Bernadette described before. So what are we doing for everybody, but what are we doing to really tackle those inequalities? And that's reflected in, actually, when you think about the aim we've got for our in early years, the aim that we've got in terms of reducing the gap between those who are eligible for free school meals and those who are not. That's one of the really critical things, but there's lots of other inequalities for us to get to grips with as well. And the final bit that's really a way of working that's really important is around ensuring that we're developing resilient communities and empowering communities to have a say in what happens and be engaged in helping deliver what happens within Calderdale. So lots of work that has gone on already in terms of trying to frame how we're going to have those conversations with communities and how we're going to do it in a joined up way, so we're not going out as a council, as a place in Calderdale, having lots of conversations in the same communities, but we're having one conversation in communities about a range of things, and this being one of those, and recognizing that the role individuals and communities have in good health and well-being. And we talk quite a lot about peer support in the national programme. Peer support can mean many things to many people, and it can be programmes of support, but most people's peer support comes from those people that are close to them, their friends and their family, and it's really important that we recognise that as part of our offer as well. I am going to pause now. We've got some colleagues with us from different bits of the system, just to emphasise how much of a partnership approach this is really, and I think we'd welcome thoughts and questions from you.
Thank you for that, and thanks for the input so far. One of my underlying concerns, let's start one very much on the positive, of the one point of contact, which is absolutely critical in these sorts of things. I keep going back to the burnt bridges thing some time ago, and that central to that was the fact that people didn't talk to each other, and this is a wonderful way for that not to happen in this very important set of circumstances. My question, it relates to about parents in particular, and people knowing about the service and where that one point of contact is, how they access it, are they aware of it and what they can get from it, and how we encourage parents to engage, because I always feel there's an element of, well, we should know what we're doing, shouldn't we? We're parents, and getting people to accept that they should engage, that they can benefit from it, they're not bad parents because they're engaging, all those aspects of it is one of my areas of following on from this. Sorry, I'll shut up rambling there, but I think you're getting what I'm aiming at.
Yeah, I think it's important to state we're starting from a position of relative strength in the assets that we've already got. So if you think about, I think for a lot of families would see children's centres as their go-to place in the early years. And within a children's centre, you've clearly got the core provision within there. But you know, a lot of children's centres, you also get to see a health visitor or a midwife as well, and you get that kind of engagement on that personal level with the children's centre core service. I don't know whether you wanted to come in, Karen, on that to talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, the universal offer from the children's centres is all consenting parents get a home visit to explain what children's centre is all about. They will have attended antenatal sessions in the children's centre and got familiar with faces of practitioners within the centres. But our early years outreach team go out and they speak to parents in their own homes, gain consent from them for us to be able to send information out and contact them on a regular basis to engage them, and talk to them at that very early stage about anything that is concerning them, so that it can be flagged up early as a vulnerable family, to enable us to signpost them onto the correct support, which could be our own family support service. So that is offered to all families, but only if they consent to our service. So there is an element there that we do miss some vulnerable families because they don't want to engage with services. But it's a really positive thing. It's a really good way of building those relationships right from the very early start with all families. And by going out and doing that home visit, they've got a familiar face that's going to be delivering the baby massage and the baby groups that we encourage them to come to as first port of call.
Thank you, Karen. And the other thing that so you talked about, how do we communicate with families? We've done quite a lot of work on the family journey. Rachel, do you want to just mention that?
Yeah, so the family journey we developed following our local government association peer review into our speech and language needs for children under 5. And it was very much about, do parents know where to go for support or what support is available, but also how they can support themselves. So we've developed, alongside with partners and families through the work we've done with children's centres, a 12-step process. Now this, well, I say process, it's like a journey basically, from preconception to a child being ready for reception in school. And it just really highlights those key contacts that are available universally to all families. So when we say that, we're talking about midwifery services, health visiting, children's centres, links with community groups, such as your baby and toddler groups, and also sort of the key ways they could get support for funding for early childcare as well. That is published currently on our Calderdale Council website. We're looking at developing some hard copy versions as well that can be distributed through places like GP practices, through registrars at birth registrations, and through our midwifery and health visiting service. In the long term, it will then be part of the Family Hub Start for Life offer. So it will really form like the spine of our approach to information for families, and one place where to go to find out about what is available in Calderdale for children under the age of 5.
Yeah, that's interesting, Rachel. Are you referring also, there's like a poster, I think, with that sequence of events on it, isn't there? Sort of cartoony style poster, which seems very effective. It looks to me just the sort of thing that we as councillors here should be putting out to around our wards as well. So it's all part of this communication process, isn't it? But Councillor Monteith, Brenda, you've had your hand up, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think this is a fantastic strategy and a fantastic development plan and delivery plan that you are proposing. Would you ask for feedback in terms of the graphics? And personally, I find the graphics unintelligible. For me, I prefer the sequential descriptors of both the strategy and the delivery plan, rather than this kind of schematic poster style presentation. But I don't know whether that's an age thing or whether it's my dyslexia. I just can't make any sense of that schematic presentation where you've got the child at the middle of it and it kind of spans out to all sorts of stuff that I just get confused. But that's just my feedback on it. But your actual strategy, I think, is fantastic, and your delivery plan when I could read it in a sequential format, 100% behind it. Great, thank you.
I think that's fair, Brenda. I mean, we're all different, aren't we? And maybe there is a need to put it in a different format for those people who appreciate other formats. Ben and colleagues, reaction to that?
I think it's a very fair comment, and what's going through my mind is whether we just need a plain text version to go alongside it as well as a summary document. I think it's a point well made.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, good. I don't seem to have any other hands up on this. I think you're in danger of having sort of wiped the floor with us in terms of your knowledge and information. The areas which I think are really important there, and as Councillor Monteith said, it certainly seems a very well thought out process if we take into account Brenda's comment on things. And the support which you're getting from the various characters and the various colleagues involved in this is really important. And the fact we've got this one point of contact situation, which I think is a step absolutely in the right direction. I don't know whether anybody's got any other comments to make, where I'm slightly surprised. Ben, you have got your hand up, and so has Rachel, but we'll go to serve.
So I'd welcome any comments outside the meeting as well if people want to do that, and I recognise not everybody's had all the papers at the meeting, so do contact me if there's anything else that you wanted to pick up. We did bring a couple of people from Frontline who you haven't heard from. If you'd like to hear from them, I'm sure that they'll give you a couple of minutes about why they see this as an opportunity and how things are starting to change, if that would be helpful to you.
Yes, please.
So I particularly got Claire and Alison in mind for just giving a bit of a view from their perspective. Claire, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So my involvement, I do work in sort of secondary care, sort of specialist services, where my expertise is seeing where it's already gone wrong. And so it's really great to be able to sort of work alongside, thinking in from a preventative point of view, thinking about that. We know that parental mental health problems are what impact on your early life and the child's sort of infant mental health and their relationship with their parent. And there's so much that we could do that's early, that's preventable, that we could make big changes that have a lifetime effect for children if we can get in really early. So it's brilliant to be able to be invited along and be part of looking at things early before they've gone wrong, and hopefully will stop, people needing to progress and need services like the one that I work in.
Yeah, and thank you for coming on and giving us that. Another colleague was going to introduce something.
Yeah, so I'm, as I've mentioned before, the infant feeding lead for the health visitors. So infant feeding actually includes close loving relationships for parents and their babies. And again, like Claire, it's about getting in early. So a lot of the support will come in the antenatal period. These close loving relationships focus on not only sort of like early brain development, but early nutrition really forms part of that. So most of you might be familiar with the 1001 critical days for brain development. It also includes early nutrition, so maternal nutrition, and then supporting mums to breastfeed their babies. There's lots of benefits for breastfeeding. But we also know that it's very emotive. There's 8 out of 10 women will stop breastfeeding before they're ready to do so, because it can be a struggle. So it's about having the support in there early. And, we have peer supporters within Calderdale that are all volunteers, and they will be forming part of this delivery as well. And again, just trying to improve breastfeeding rates and trying to reach out to areas where breastfeeding's not the norm. So we've already started a little bit of a project in North East Halifax because conversations were closed at the door. So when health visitors were going to do their antenatal contacts, they were greeted with, "Don't talk to me about breastfeeding." So we want to listen to those people and say that we will support them with formula feeding. So a lot of the formula feeding information has changed now to include this responsiveness and responding to babies, and not just feeding your babies by the clock, but knowing that babies need to be close and held close. But what we're promoting to try and open up a little bit of the conversation is that just in 1 ml of colostrum, so that's your first milk, just 1 ml has got millions of germ killing cells, and showing sort of like just a picture, it's very simple, has helped to open up some conversations in that area. So part of this family hubs model will be looking at doing that in much more detail and capturing the data and really seeing if that makes a difference. The idea would be it doesn't have to lead to breastfeeding, but did they give their babies a little bit of colostrum? Have they taken on board the information about close loving relationships and not just thinking a close loving relationship is for a breastfeeding person, that it's also for somebody that chooses to give their baby milk by bottle? So that's just a little bit, and I could go on, but I realise there's a hand up.
Well, and I think also it's this sort of judgmental aspect, isn't it, to breastfeeding? There is an assumption, I think, with many, particularly new mothers, who feel that they're being judged if they don't feel comfortable with, or whatever, with breastfeeding, that it's a problem and they're being judged because they're not choosing, for whatever reason, to do so. And it's approaching it in that sort of, as you say, the problems it had on the door. We're not talking about breastfeeding. That's an area, and we need to make people aware that it's not a judgment. It's about helping the early life of their child and their relationships with, Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And just picking up on what you said, we do recognise that when breastfeeding doesn't work out, that those mums need listening visits, because we recognise that it's impacting on the mental health, and it's about preventing it, escalating and them feeling like total failures. It's about supporting them through that journey.
Very much so. Sorry, Dot. Councillor Foster, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Alison, I'm really, really pleased you've talked about breastfeeding, because it's one of the things that I have been an impassioned supporter of. I think in total, I have 3 children. My eldest 2 were 20 months apart, and I tandem fed them for about 10 months until my eldest gave up. They both quitted around about 2.5. My youngest hung on in there until he was 3 and a bit. So yeah, I'm very much on the side of long-term breastfeeding being seen as the norm, but equally I recognise that it's not for everybody and there shouldn't be any judgment there. But what really got me through, and this is as true, bearing in mind that there's 10 years between my eldest and my youngest, this is as true when I had my 3rd child as it was when I had my first, was support. It really made a massive, massive difference just to be able to sit down with somebody else who just got what you were going through. That yes, okay, yesterday was absolutely marvellous. Today's been absolutely horrendous. What have I done wrong? Well, actually nothing. Nothing is wrong. It's just that it's just normal for not every day to be a swimmingly wonderful experience. So, being able to have that conversation, being able to talk through issues that you're having. And, when I had Patrick, the issues were just as present, even though by this point I'd probably I had about 4 years in the bag of experience, but that didn't make any difference. There was that time lag in there, and I still needed support. And I have to give a big shout out actually to Marilyn Rogers, who is the infant feeding advisor at Calderdale Hospital. She is just Wonder Woman as far as breastfeeding is concerned. She really is absolutely wonderful. But yeah, it's support. And whether or not you choose to breastfeed, actually support for parents of babies, no matter which way you decide to feed your baby, is really, really important for mental health of mums. Sitting with somebody else who gets it, who realizes that actually having a 6-week baby is really, really hard work. It's not a picnic. It's not how everything appears on Instagram. It's not all sweetness and light and sitting beautifully with an immaculate coffee with your immaculately done hair and your immaculately done nails. It's not like that at all. I looked like shit when I had 6-week-old babies. I really did. I looked like I'd been dragged through the middle and I was absolutely knackered. But that's the norm for most people. And actually, what we see on social media is not the norm. And I think making that support aware and available for parents and dads as well. I include dads in this because it's not a picnic for them either. It's hard work having a baby in the house, and I think you don't always get that picture from sort of the beautifully presented stuff on social media, which quite frankly is a load of rubbish. So I think support is absolutely key. Thank you.
Thank you for your impassioned presentation.
Sorry, I was just going to come in there and just say, with every contact that the health visitors do, we're now encouraging them right from the antenatal contact to ask the parents if they would like a referral to peer support. So we do get lots of referrals in the antenatal period. And this is virtual, so it will be by phone, by a breastfeeding peer supporter who, as you say, counsellor, is walk the path, just somebody that gets what you're going through. And that contact is then offered again. So during the pandemic, we realised that we'd lost a lot of our face-to-face support. So myself and Bridget All, who coordinates the breastfeeding peer supporters, we said if we did an early day call, so as soon as we get that notification that a baby's born, the health visitors will make an early day call to just introduce themselves, just ask how feeding is going, regardless of the method. If they are breastfeeding, they're asked if they want a referral to a breastfeeding peer supporter, and then again at the new birth visit and the 6 to 8 week contact. And the uptake from mums having to make that call again went up tenfold, because when you're offering support, for a lot of people, they don't want to be picking the phone up and saying, actually, I could do with some support, but somebody offering to do that referral, then them getting the phone call has just really helped, so we've kept that part, after the pandemic, and we'll carry on moving forward.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Rachel, you've had your hand up for a little while. I'll come on to Ben, I think, on this one as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on a point made there by Councillor Foster regarding support for dads and male carers as well. This was highlighted in our strength and needs assessment, that dads are wanting more information around supporting their partners through breastfeeding. And I think it will be threaded throughout the work we do on our Starting Well strategy, but also with the Family Hubs work, that we will make how we engage with fathers will be really important across all the areas, not just infant feeding, but again around parent-infant relationships, parent mental health, the home learning environment. The dads have such an important role to play in supporting their children's speech, language, and communication. So that is something that we really will be focusing on as part of our strategy work as well.
That's good. That's good to hear. And I think I've heard Dot's impassioned speech in support of breastfeeding at least once before, but that doesn't denigrate it at all, Dot. But I think what it also
soapbox but duly recognised.
What it also does is that a lot of the things you were saying about it apply right across the board to the other aspects that we're talking about tonight as well, the support and all of those sorts of things as well. So I just wanted to add that to it, because some of the things you're saying there really do go across the board on all these issues. Ben, you've come in, and then Councillor Rivron.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time. I'll keep it brief.
Yeah,
and I think you've said it for me really there. One of the things that the Family Health Programme should enable us to do with the additional resource it gives us is to be able to really take a strengths-based approach, look at what's working well in different areas and see if we can apply it more widely. So if you think of some of the work Alison described there about what she was describing really was co-designing care on the doorstep really with individuals, and then being partners in their care. That's really important, and we can do that in other bits of the work programme. And also I think more broadly than that, some of the things we talked about the value of support and the value of the right support, and the support at the right time and accessible support that Alison's also talked about. Again, that can apply to various other work streams. There's lots of examples of that in some of the other work streams as well, of things they're doing really well, and they might be of interest to Alison in terms of the work she does. So it's that cross-fertilisation and thinking about the big picture rather than individual silos of service is going to be really important.
Thank you for that. Helen, Councillor Rivron.
Very briefly, my youngest child is now 29, so I don't think Dot and I think we've unconsciously passed the baton between us, because I was the passionate advocate of breastfeeding before Dot, and I never probably dared say, as Dot had, that I fed my children until they were 3 years old. It should never be judgmental, but it can be a really great experience when it works, and totally echo what Dot has said about support. It was actually my youngest who actually once got asked to leave the stream baths as its own one for publicly feeding my daughter. I think we've moved on, and I'm really pleased about that, because I hope nobody's ever whatever their feeding choice. It was actually in the Courier at the time.
Thank you for that, Helen. One final question from me really towards Ben or any of your colleagues. Clearly the reaction from this group is that there's some very good stuff going on here, and the pulling together and the one point of contact is absolutely the right direction. We agree with moving the way you're proposing. Are there still aspects that you feel need addressing?
There are always aspects that need addressing, aren't there? I think what I would say is we've got a really strong partnership approach to solving these issues. So I think where we think we can get support from members, we will come to you and say, can you give us some support? And we'll be really open and honest about that. I think because of the interdependencies between the voluntary sector and the NHS and ourselves in this respect, generally we can work things through between us and come up with some solutions. It sometimes takes us a while because some of them are quite tricky, and quite often it's a case of us having lots and lots going on and it just not being joined up and getting the right people around the table to start joining stuff up, rather than us having big gaps. And I think that's what we found as we've gone through the process. So there's nothing specific at this point. I would say, Councillor Evans, can you help me with this, please? What I would say is what we're really keen to do is get the views from members at both in their roles as on Scrutiny, but also in their roles as people who know their communities and hear what their communities are saying as we go forward. And if you have got anything that you want to bring to us about this agenda at any point, we'd welcome it, and we would feed that into our discussions.
Thank you. Yeah, that's appreciated, and exactly what I would hope you would say, which leads me really into the further actions and timescales on the report, which suggests that it's brought Scrutiny in summer 2023 to provide details of progress and impact. Yes, please. I think it would be an appropriate response to that. And our thanks to all of your colleagues, you and Ben and all of your colleagues, for this. I don't think anybody else is wishing to make a contribution. So can I thank everybody for their contributions to this one? And there's obviously some good work going on there. But let's take what Ben said seriously and feedback anything that we can we feel can be of use. Thank you very much. Can
Ashley,
we move on?
Can I just say very quick, just to say thank you to all the colleagues who've spoken this evening. It is a fantastic piece of work. It's very well supported as well, I think, you know, sort of like across the board, and the joined up approach of it is just so fantastic, and I'm glad that that's feeling very supported by the Scrutiny Board as well. I'm not going to say any more because it's been already all been said, but yeah, I just wanted to say I came along to sort of support, and I don't think I'm massively needed because it's all very well supported, but I just wanted to say it's sort of supported through Cabinet as well.
That's appreciated, Sarah. Yeah, understood. Thank you. Item 7, quarter report detailing caseloads. Clearly, there are quite a lot of pressures in here that we're aware of. Who's going to do the outline for us on this one?
Di Drury's joined us, Councillor Evans, Assistant
Right,
Director. Yeah, and Louise Ambler is with us as well this evening, who's our Principal Social Worker. So they're both here, but I'll hand over to Di.
I think you produced a report, didn't you, Louise and Di? So please.
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yes, good evening to everyone, and thank you for asking us along. So Louise is here as well, our Principal Social Worker, and obviously we can answer any questions that you have or do our very best. You've got the report in front of you. I think just as a very broad summary, I appreciate time is perhaps a bit pressing for you, but this is our just regular. Yeah, that's okay. You've had a busy evening. This is our regular update that we bring every quarter, just looking at our social work vacancies, our workloads, and our caseloads across the patch really. I mean, in broad summary, what we'd say is we're seeing perhaps a little bit of increase in pressure. You'll notice that just slight rise in the numbers of sort of children subject to child protection, children looked after, and that activity around the front door. It's not huge, it's not dramatic. It's bringing us back probably broadly in line in terms of the child protection work where we were, previously. It's still quite a bit lower actually than it was in September 2020, but we've just seen that very slight increase, and I think we're noticing a bit more demand through our front door. So and we're working really hard on that. We're working to try and obviously alleviate things for families without all of our support with the cost of living work we're doing, looking at child poverty, but we're also trying to make sure families can have the right intervention at early help as well. But we've just seen that slight rise, so that's led to, it's fed into over the summer and from the spring really, a bit of a rise in our caseloads as well, but they are still well managed. They're still within our targets we have, so we don't want a qualified social worker. Their caseloads are capped at 23 and it's 15 for newly qualified social workers, and we're pretty healthy with that. So we are healthy in Calderdale compared to a lot of our immediate neighbours. So our caseloads are steady. We are managing the work quite well. We do have a number of vacancies, as you'll see, and we've given you a breakdown by team. What we've also added in this time is the complement of what each team, each part of the service, how many social workers they should have, because I think that was asked for last time, so that you get some sense of how stable it is. I would say our locality teams, where we do a lot of the very complex child protection work and court work, we've got pretty low vacancy rates there. We're pretty stable, and we've got, we're not too concerned about any vacancies there. We also regularly recruit students. We've got another batch of students who've just come through, and recruitment's going on. What we are seeing is obviously a bit less experience. So as we're recruiting new social workers and trying to bring on our own and grow our own, what that does start to do is it starts to diminish the level of experience over time. So that's one of the pressures. We've probably got a bit more vacancies around our front door. We've got some agency workers covering those vacancies. We haven't had to have a huge number more agency staff, but where we have got people on maternity leave or people who have left and we've not been able to recruit, then clearly we do bring in agency, and we're supported to do that, but we manage that quite carefully because we're aware of the cost implications. Just to let you know that together with adult services, we have been doing a lot of work over the last 6 months on recruitment and retention, looking at our offer to social workers and our initiatives. That has resulted in some successful work really to try and slightly uplift our salaries for entrance for social workers, because we know we weren't in Calderdale, we'd fallen a bit behind in our salary levels to our immediate neighbours in Kirklees and Leeds and Wakefield, and we felt that wasn't making us competitive. So within the the directorate, we've done some work on that and looked at what we were able to do and got senior management support for that. So we're currently working that through to hopefully bring about a slight uplift in salaries from the new year, which I think will be very, very welcome to our staff. So I'll shut up at that point. I don't know if Louise wants to add anything or if there are any questions.
Louise, anything?
I suppose all I would say is that I think that what we're very mindful that the challenges that we face around recruitment and retention remain a national concern within social work, and I guess I think there are also other pieces of work ongoing to try and just broaden our approach to recruiting new staff, and I think that's it. Sort of in the first section of the report just sets out some of the things that we're doing to try and bring in people through different routes into the profession, and hopefully then also support them to stay with us longer term as well.
Yeah, indeed. And that's obviously a problem areas in terms of the numbers and the declining experience levels that Di referred to. That's an issue, isn't it, there? Have we got any questions that I can see our hands raised particularly? There's a reference in the report to increasing recognition of the need to return to a greater number of face-to-face meetings. I can see the reasons for that. What actions are you able to take on that? Is that an area you feel you can move on?
I think that's already starting, isn't it? Actually, yes. To be fair, I think social workers themselves are saying we want to do this, and I think so. I think across the board, I think partner agencies have also echoed that request. So I'm certainly aware of conversations I've had with staff about how they're managing meetings, and I think definitely there is a move to return to face-to-face, particularly for core group or child in need meetings. And I think schools now are much more comfortable to have professionals coming in and using their facilities again, which are really helpful in terms of providing a venue for those sorts of meetings to take place. I think what one of the last bits of the jigsaw is when they complete the work on the building at Horton Street, which will then allow us to bring in families for other meetings that perhaps need a bit more of a sort of a formal tone to them, in order for families to understand the seriousness of those discussions. I'm thinking of the sort of pre-proceedings type of meetings, but it also offers a safer venue if you need to have a conversation with somebody that might be a bit difficult for them, which at the minute we still don't really have. So that will definitely make a big difference in the coming weeks and months.
Have I missed the timescale on the Horton Street when you get back in there? What's the timescale on it?
I think we're hoping for completion in sort of early in next year. I think January or February. I think the works, Julie might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the work's about to start really very soon on Horton Street. Yeah.
The staff are in there, Councillor Evans, and they've been in there. The staff are based in there. They're on the first floor of Horton Street and have been during the pandemic. We thought it was just really important to bring the social workers back to be together in their teams. And because of the limited space, it's not as much as we had before, because we vacated space in different buildings around the borough. People on a bit of a rota, so some days it'll be locality teams, other days fostering, other days family intervention team, but they all have a time in the office. We've got all the kit and the equipment there. The work that Di's referring to with Louise at the meeting rooms to allow more face-to-face. There are some meeting rooms for the staff to have their pod reflex and their supervision upstairs, but these are more downstairs, so they're public accessible, and it'll really enhance our ability to have face-to-face meetings. But the staff have been in there, I can't remember how long, it's quite a long time now, isn't it, Louise, that staff have been there, so they are there.
And I think the meeting rooms are going to be complete and ready certainly early in the new year, Councillor Evans. That's what I've been assured. January or February time.
Yeah. Because obviously that's a limitation if you've not got a premises to do it in.
Yes. Yeah.
You've listed under item 2, page 64 of your report, a whole list of actions that you're taking to various degrees. I just wondered how much impact this is having yet in terms of helping the situation. You know, talking about permanent children's social work workforce, ongoing recruitment. There's talking about social worker remaining extremely challenging. The issue is regularly raised with the Department of Education. I don't suppose you get very far with them. But in terms of the actions you're taking, clearly you're taking a wide spectrum of actions.
Yeah.
Do you feel those are having impacts? Are there other things you could do that you think about?
I mean, I think they are having an impact, and I think the challenge is that you can continue to recruit, but then you also do lose staff as well at the same time. So you often just replenish the pot. I do think, and I think that we do have a really established process of recruiting newly qualified staff that have been with us on student placement, and I think that sort of process is really well established. I think we do. I think I'm really encouraged by the fact that we've got somebody starting with us in January who is going to be a return to social work person. We've not had anybody in that sort of program before. I don't think we'll recruit lots of people through that route, but what I'm hoping is that when she's in position, then we can start to advertise it and maybe get some publicity around the fact that we've been able to offer that. I think it is slightly different to some of the offers that other local authorities are making. So that I think that's a really good news story that we could use just to encourage other people to consider a return to the profession. And I guess the other thing that could be quite exciting is our discussion with Frontline, which we've never used before, but would fit that the way they work fits really nicely with our systemic practice model, and I think we have some level of influence around who is recruited into that training program, and hopefully if we can look at local candidates who have an investment in Calderdale, then the hope would be that then we're sort of growing our own within our own model of practice, who then are committed to us. So I think that some of those results we won't see immediately, but that's something that would come online within the next 12 months, and we would start to see start to have some candidates with us through that route, hopefully.
I think just to add also, you know, that, as I said, we're almost over the line with that slight uplift to the salary levels that we're advertising post that. So that's across children's and adults, and obviously that will be followed up in the new year. We've been talking to our comms and our recruitment teams. We want quite a splash marketing campaign. You know, we've got to do a bit more in terms of the attractiveness of our recruitment campaigns. So we're hoping that might have an impact as well. I mean, I know I was on a call with colleagues around the country the other day, and there are quite a few authorities up and down the country, and some more down south perhaps. They are looking to recruit abroad. You know, they are going out to South Africa, recruiting social workers who have trained in different countries. I know we've done that in the past as well, when things have been difficult, but there are some authorities doing that. And I was on a call the other day, and some are going out to Scandinavian countries, and one of the authorities down south is going out to South Africa. They've already recruited quite a few social workers from there. Now, we haven't contemplated that, we've not gone that far, and I think we're hoping we can try and get some results from all the things we're trying at the moment. But as I say, it just shows you some of the pressures nationally, to try and get social workers that some authorities are considering all sorts of
Indeed. Our ability
ingenious ideas.
Our ability has always been an issue, hasn't it? But the positive one I see from way back is that the students that come and work with us seem very happy to stay with us in a lot of cases, which is a real positive, and that's something to build on.
Absolutely.
I've got another question. I can't see any others. Just one more, I promise you, from me. The graph on open cases. There's a very serious uplift in open cases there. Reasons for that?
I'll be absolutely honest, I'm not sure that some of the earlier figures were entirely correct. So I think, if I'm absolutely honest, it's not quite as steep an uplift as it appears to be. I feel more confident about my figures this time. Right. Than we have done. I think sometimes, and there's a constant sort of ongoing discussion across with our colleagues in business intelligence to make sure that the figures that we're pulling through are actually accurate. I think sometimes it depends on how things have been set up to pull the information through. So I was in two minds as to whether to try and amend the graph for the previous quarters, and I thought that might throw you as well. So I thought let's hopefully, as of this point, we know we're accurate, and then we'll obviously continue to track them.
So we think we might have underreported previously.
I think
Louise,
so.
Don't we?
Yeah, I think so.
We'll make a note of that and check it out next time. Any other questions?
But yeah, we're always keeping an eye on it. You know, it is a challenge, and it was interesting that what we've discussed with our management team, that we had quite a flurry of activity and quite a lot of referrals in May, and that was quite interesting around May time and June. But there'd been a lot of publicity about the two serious tragedies, you know, Star Hobson and in Bradford, and Arthur Labino Hughes. So the two little ones where there was a serious case reviews, there's two infants who very sadly died. In other authorities, there was quite a lot of publicity, you know, and then I think on the back of that, which is really welcome. But we did notice, particularly our contacts at the front door and referrals from sort of friends and neighbours or whatever, concerned members of the public, did shoot up a bit. And then some of that feeds through then, you know, to assessments and to some extra work. So we've discussed that. Other than that, we didn't see a particular reason for a significant increase, but we have had more UASC cases as well. I mean, again, it doesn't account for all of that, but we've had almost double the number of unaccompanied asylum seeker children this year than we've had already than we had in the whole of last year. So there's been a definitely upturn in unaccompanied asylum seeker children.
Understood. Councillor Fassal, Shaz, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think in terms of recruitment, I'm just thinking maybe we could utilize the BME community in Calderdale as well in terms of recruitment.
Yes.
That would help. Yeah. So there is a huge, sizable pool that we can tap into.
Interesting thought.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
It is helpful if I can just add. I know that there are colleagues within the current workforce who have roots and links within the local community, and I think it definitely is something that we can look further at. I know I went along to a fostering recruitment event a few months ago now at one of the centres in town, and that was really, really positive. Lots of really good discussion. So I think, you know, having done that and seen that, I think there's definitely scope to explore that further. Definitely.
Yeah, I think we'd always want to increase our links, wouldn't we? And Councillor Fazal, we really try and encourage a diverse workforce as well, don't we, Louise? I know we do have a fairly diverse makeup already, don't we, within our social work teams? But obviously, you know, we encourage more of that because it's rich for the diverse families that we're working with.
Absolutely, yeah, critical. Good, thank you for that. I don't think I've seen any others. I think we can move on to the final item on the agenda, the work programme. Mike, do you want to raise any issues on that? I think you're on mute.
Not now. Not really, Chair. Other than to say I'm slightly concerned that the March the 1st meeting looks very busy. You've got 4 items on it.
It does, doesn't it? Yes.
I just wonder, and I'd welcome Julie's views as well, as whether perhaps the quarterly report we make as a briefing paper rather than a scrutiny board item for March, just to reduce the pressure on that agenda, so members will have the opportunity to.
You could always fire questions back on it.
Fire questions back, exactly. I don't think that causes any problem, does it, Julie?
No, I don't think so. We did talk about making it a kind of full monthly report, didn't we, instead of every quarter? But I think it'd be absolutely fine. You know, I think it's such a regular report. You know what the position is. I think if there was anything in there that you were particularly concerned about or wanted to comment on, we can take that. But I think you could have it for kind of noting and assurance. If there was any kind of outliers there, you could ask for specific questions, and we could get a response. To slim down the agenda. If that's helpful. Yeah,
that'd be good. Yeah, good.
So I think the only other thing, Chair, not for discussion, I don't think at all, but to report that you contributed membership to the Buying Our Care working party. That's a joint working party of Adults and Children Scrutiny Board. That Scrutiny Board has started its work, hasn't got anywhere near concluding it, but will conclude the work in February.
Exactly. Dot, you've got your hand up. So.
Yeah, just a quick one about the domestic abuse scrutiny in a day proposal. Have we moved any further forward with sort of volunteers to be on that, or what we're doing with it, or proposals?
That's a really great reminder, Councillor Foster.
It is.
it's not forgotten, but I don't think progress has been as fast as it could have been. I'll follow that up this week.
Thank you for that, Dot.
It says February, March, and that'll be on it before. That'll be upon us before we know it. So if we want to get it done before the end of the municipal year, then it would be good to crack on with it.
Yeah, good reminder. Thank you for that. Thank you. Any other comments from anybody? Or can I thank you all for an evening which was quite heavy, but good. I enjoyed it. It's very useful. Thank you for all the participants, all those who contributed towards it all. And I won't see you till after Christmas on this meeting, will I? So have a good Christmas, one and all.